Welcome back to United TV. We're going to be talking about Alex Scott today because there's a few stories talking about potentially what the situation would be if Manchester United were looking at trying to sign Scott. They've already done research looking at him in January. It does seem to be, if you look at the stories coming out, there's a few different angles to look at this. One is going to be potentially how much do Bournemouth want for this player? This is a player that, if you go back a few years, player of the season in the Championship with Bristol City, obviously developing a lot on Manchester United's radar for a lot of this season. And actually, recently, people have been talking about him as well. The price tag of 65 million is something which Bournemouth have put out there. So 65 million is pretty much, we saw a story about 6 months ago that Semenyo was 100 million. 65 million is Bournemouth's kind of wish for this deal if it does happen. Bournemouth don't want to sell Alex Scott as well. That's another factor. There's going to be a few teams interested in signing him though, and I think United do think that this is one where if we're going to sign multiple midfielders, if we can get the price down, it's going to be quite an attractive prospect. So this is one where I think I invite people in the comments to let me know where do you rate this transfer? Are you looking at this as going to be a player that's worth trying to sign? And certainly on recent form, people are looking at him as being a top quality player. It depends how much it's going to cost. I think there's always going to be probably a factor in how much it's going to cost. And also another link, which somebody did mention this recently as well, that he would prefer a move to Manchester United this summer, depending on what options are available, depending on which clubs are interested. Then he would prefer a move to Manchester United for family reasons. Growing up with May Letizia, who's a stepsister, this is probably why it's been linked as well. They grew up together. Bournemouth are asking 65 million, as it says. Manchester United would hope to get this deal done a bit cheaper. But again, I suppose at this moment in time, we don't really know what sort of price players are going to go for. And it is something that potentially their prices could go up in the summer. They were quite expensive last summer as well. So it depends if there's a lot of market. There are a lot of midfield targets and a lot of midfielders changing clubs. So that's probably one factor which maybe stops things spiraling out of control. I'm hoping. But I'm going to go into the comments and just get some initial thoughts on what people are thinking regarding this one, just to see what people. Just let me know what you think regarding. If Alex Scott is a player you think Man United should go for, let me know. If you're questioning it, also let me know as well. And then Danny B in the comments says, excellent signing, but needs to be part of three midfielders coming in, incoming, saying Scott plus a second midfielder will not be enough. And this is why the story on the screen at the moment is David Ornstein saying that there's obviously a lot of candidates for midfield position, but don't rule out Alex Scott is something that David Ornstein's saying. He might have gone a little bit under the radar up to this point, and that's probably true. If you've been watching a lot of Manchester United YouTube channels, then there's probably last summer it was all about Belieber. This summer, or actually coming up towards this summer, I think most of the stories have been probably looking at Anderson, maybe also Angela Stiller, and probably if you're looking at what's going to be a third target, probably Tonali. They're probably going to be the big stories as well that we've been looking at. This is a story which I think will gain a bit of traction and potentially gain a bit more media coverage as we get close to the transfer window because there's a lot of top targets, and it might be that we do see potentially clubs like Liverpool, clubs like Manchester City, particularly Manchester City, looking at Anderson. And this is why we might suddenly see that this player moves up the list. You could say the same for Fernandes at West Ham, a little bit under the radar as a transfer target, but a very good player. And Manchester United and a couple of other clubs are certainly looking at, I say that not just Premier League players, but there's certainly going to be more Premier League players than usual in terms of the transfer targets. And this is why we're seeing this. So Ornstein's right. It's going to be definitely definitely one to look out for in the media stream. There's going to be definitely more news coming out from this one. I saw a few stories this morning, hence the ones on the screen. So we're already seeing a little bit of momentum building regarding this one. So I'll go through some other views as well and see what people are thinking. Welcome Clive to the chat. Welcome Cody and Kazi as well. And you're saying, well, I'm not sure your ranking system regarding this one, but yeah, he's going to be definitely looking at that one. I say, just definitely. Also, that Naomi is someone I'm trying to get back in contact with as well. So that's obviously someone I did message Naomi. So hopefully we can get her back involved as well. But no, I appreciate that. So if I was going to do, I might put a poll in the comments in a second, and we might talk about this, the situation regarding, say, Alex Scott. Kelly said I wouldn't mind Alex Scott coming. Do people look at this in terms of when I'm talking about Scott as a target? I'm not saying that he would be the number one target, but in terms of looking at a second midfielder signed, if we could get one of the primary targets over the line, is there any negativity into people's minds regarding this one? I think for me, it's always going to be a question of what the budget's going to be. Can Manchester United get three midfield signings? And what sort of price do you think Manchester United could get this deal done for? Like Bournemouth want to get the highest possible price. We know that if Semenyo goes for 70 million, I don't think Alex Scott should be in the same sort of price bracket as that. I don't think he's going to be anywhere near the sort of price you're going to have to pay for Anderson or Tonali. So is there some sort of middle ground where is it going to cost like are we looking at like an Agate type transfer fee here? Is like 50 million that sort of price? Is it going to be possible? The only thing that makes me think it might be difficult is not that there's competition because there's going to be competition for a lot of players. The question is going to be Bournemouth don't want to sell him. They're not going to want to. They don't need to sell him for. They don't need to raise money. They've sold a lot of players recently, Bournemouth. They want to keep him, but there will be. I think they paid about 20, is it 25, 30 million they paid for him. I think it's somewhere around that sort of figure. It might be that they're looking at that maybe they are going to cash in. So I think United would have to pay a decent price. I don't think we're looking at the sort of crazy money that was talked about with other midfielders. But again, there might be definitely scope for if Manchester United actually want to get a deal done maybe they need to get one deal done a bit sooner. Like if we look at the transfer window, and we discussed this yesterday, the day before, if we look at the transfer window and it opens, and suddenly, if large money goes on one of the big targets that might move, if Tonali goes for
And
massive
suddenly,
money, or if we see a situation where Anderson goes for massive money, is that going to push up the price of other targets? And I think that's one thing that people are a little bit concerned about that maybe the price actually starts going up for midfield targets. And if we saw that happen, we'd be looking at thinking, why don't Manchester United get in a bit early and maybe put in an offer that could get accepted? It's a difficult situation, I know, but it's something that you have to consider. Saying regarding this one, I think with if you could look into assess where you rate Alex Scott, very young player. I think it's got loads of potential, isn't it? So you have to look at that and say it is a lot of potential, but again, I don't think Manchester United can be spending the sort of money they might have to spend to get. If they're looking at a Wharton or an Anderson or a Tonali, that's going to be that's going to be when we're talking about it, like it's going to be like 80, 90, 100, maybe 100 million for one of those players. And Manchester United have to then look at how much money have they got on the rest of the transfers. And I don't think we should be looking at beyond 50 would probably be and say not a priority signing. So not a priority. I think midfielders are a priority. I think the difficulty is going to be deciding which ones you go for. If you're looking at the first midfielder you're going to sign, I think you should be looking at trying to get if you're going to sign three midfielders, what's going to be the first signing you can do? Like, could you? Are Manchester United going to put an offer on the table for Belieber that is somewhat similar to what they valued at him last season? It seems that from what I've seen, if Manchester United wanted Hackney or they wanted Gomez, would those deals not have already been done? I think they might have been done in January if they did. If they did want to get those players, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to wait until the summer then try and sign them. Particularly as that I don't think the price is going to go down. Like the price that was in January, there seems to be an escalation in transfer fees recently with a lot of money. There's a lot more prize money from the Champions League filtering through. So I don't think there's going to be a chance we see that happening. So that's one thing I was thinking of that might be an issue. So this is a dream, isn't it, Kazi? Pep leaves City a mid-table team. I mean, I'd love it to be true, but I don't think so. I don't think. I think with Manchester City, when you drop big money on Semenyo and Cunha, and you've already got a lot of players at the club, I think they've got enough to be they're going to be up there. They might not be dominant like they were, and they might not. We are probably talking about City 2 years without winning a title. So cheers, Jules. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. No, it was a really good show yesterday. Wiz not feeling very well, but we're hoping to get him back for tonight's match, which is going to be so it's going to be a tricky one. And I've seen a couple of stories discussing whether or not, and this is one I didn't want to talk about, but there's been a couple of stories pushed out this morning by I can't remember which channel it was, saying, "Are we going to see Casemiro in defence?" I really hope not. I really hope not. Thank you, Georgie. We need to kind of get the good luck going again. The game against Chelsea is going to be a tricky one, I think. So with this, like if we're looking at transfers, and I would agree that if you're looking at the best possible signing you can get, it's probably going to be Anderson or Tonali. I would say that's probably fair. Angela Stiller, a bit difficult to categorise, but you'd say Wharton is definitely considered like one of the other top targets. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head if there's anyone that would be also on that list. I think Belieber, Gomez, Fernandez, you could probably say that Hayden Hackney might be in that as well. But what you're doing here is you're probably going like category A is going to be extremely expensive. And I'd say category C might include like Buwadi, Agume in terms of like price. And if you're looking at if you're looking at the options here, in terms of like Scott, you'd be looking at it and thinking, actually, maybe if you're looking at that, then you'd have to have a conversation about, if they want 65 million, it's too much. And I think United wouldn't be paying that. But if you look at maybe like 50, is 50 going to be the price point where we look at that and think, actually, that's quite a good option? So I think we could be looking at something on those lines. One of the things that could be key, and we did touch on this in like the first couple of minutes of the stream, is that the player's going to the power is going to be with the player. Whatever happens regarding financial situation, the power will be with the player. If Manchester United are prepared to pay 50, 55, or something like that, and it's clear that it does seem to be that if Scott prefers to move to Manchester United, and I'm not sure at this point in time what the options are going to be, then I've seen Spurs and Chelsea linked with players. We're going to see other big teams linked with players, I'm sure, and particularly midfield players. If he wants to go to Manchester United, this might be exactly the same situation as in Wemo last season, and it might be pretty similar to the Benjamin Sesko situation. Alex Scott will decide where he plays football, and it won't be based on like which club is prepared to pay the most money. So in one way with that one, I think it's I don't think you need to worry too much regarding the price because I don't think we're going to be seeing I don't think we're going to be seeing somebody come in with like 60 million, etc. And yeah, and look at that and think that Manchester United have to match it. If just for example, if Spurs said, "Look, we're going to offer 65 million for Alex Scott," Manchester United can still buy him for 50, 55 million because that's exactly pretty much what happened with Benjamin Sesko. I can't remember the exact figure, but Newcastle offered more money, a higher salary, and Sesko wanted to join Manchester United. So the main thing here is going to be if Manchester United want to sign Anderson, if they want to sign Tonali, Wharton, it's the player's decision at the end of the day. That Anderson will cost a lot of money, but we won't be outbidding somebody. We'll be essentially winning the player around, getting the player to agree to our project. And this is why every player, every transfer is unique. And it's just a situation that his stepsister plays for the Manchester United women's team. They've got a good relationship. It's almost the same as like the stories where people talk about, a player wants to move to a certain area, wants to stay in a certain area. Then, the fact that Manchester United are a big team, the fact that they've got this other factors in place is just a bonus. I mean, seen so many examples of players over the year. So when Chelsea were one of the biggest teams in the Premier League, they had loads of players that wanted to come to the Premier League, obviously win trophies, but the fact they're based in London was considered a bonus. So all these factors kind of play into it. I did see. I will kind of catch up with the comments, but cheers, Clive. Says Scott would be a good signing for you. And so I saw this one. So were Man City fans happy when Sir Alex Ferguson left? Probably. They probably were because Alex Ferguson was the best manager at the time. So I think it probably were. Tonali is a great player for Clive, and Clive isn't a Manchester United fan. I think a lot of people actually do like the idea about Tonali. I think Newcastle fans I speak to, they really like Tonali, but they're kind of happy if Bruno Guimaraes stays. They feel like they can rebuild around. They see Tonali as someone they're going to sell for big money and then reinvest and try and get someone similar. That's kind of the situation, isn't it? It's but with Newcastle, they have to make one big sale. That's it. So it might be that if Tonali doesn't go anywhere and Gordon gets sold, it might be that they're looking to try and keep Tonali, which I don't know if that's no. Tonali might have had his head turned, going to have some big offers, but it could be potentially they go for something like a big rebuild at Newcastle. But it's difficult for Newcastle. Until they manage to increase their turnover, they are going to have this like one in one out almost like policy, and it cost them in the past, isn't it? Newcastle had to sell Anderson. They now kind of have, well, Isak wanted to leave, but they brought big money in. They need to make one big sale this summer, and I think it might probably be Tonali. But if Gordon goes, maybe he stays. That is one factor possibly. I think he's under contract for at least what, 4 or 5 years. Welcome, Jarvis. He says we should be all in for Scott. He's brilliant. Reminds me of Jack Grealish in stature. If you're looking at physical stature, like all carved muscle, then actually he's kind of got a bit of a similar haircut in this picture. So maybe there's a few similarities. I mean, Jack Grealish was, considered one of the players that Manchester United should be looking at along the sort of time we bought Danny van der Beek. So that's going back about 4 or 5 years now, and no, this is one where do people think that is price actually a factor for people? Because when we're looking at this, you look at the price and think every player that's going to be, and again, look, you can probably find so many examples. Every player that people think should cost 40, 45, 50 million pounds will suddenly be costing like 70 million pounds if they have a good season. It's really, really different. So it's really you got to get in quite quickly. And big up to people watching as well. Stephanie, please don't forget to click the like. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new. And if you're a new viewer, then please get in the comments and let us know so we can welcome you to the community as well. Clive is right with this one. You're not going to get a cheap midfield player. That if you think we're going to find a player in the Premier League that's playing really well and we're going to get a cheap deal, it's just not going to happen. And one of the things that's like really apparent is if you look at the Premier League, every single club now has lots of money, and every single club doesn't really need to sell. Like if you look at the prize money coming in from just being in the Premier League for teams that get promoted from the Championship, it's absolutely crazy how much money all the teams have got. I think Brentford have got a budget bigger than like I think apart from the top two or three teams in Spain, it's kind of comparable with like teams just below that level. And I think there's really so much money that it means that these teams they don't need to sell the players, so it pushes the price up. So, and particularly there seems to be a precedent in the Premier League that midfield players are incredibly expensive, and the only reason why I think price is going to be an issue is going to be we want more than one midfielder signed. That's probably the factor, but Bournemouth can want 70 million or 65 million as they put, but Bournemouth can want that sort of price. But there is probably this might be the one year where midfield players go for quite big money because we've almost got like too many midfield players changing clubs, haven't we? There's so many midfield players changing clubs at the moment. And if Manchester United bought, say we bought Alex Scott or we bought Tonali, we bought Anderson, even like if you look at Angela Stiller, if Manchester United buy three midfielders, next year we're not going to be in the market for midfielders. And I think that the market for midfielders might be a lot different next season. So there might be, if you're going to sell a midfield player, Bournemouth might keep Alex Scott for another year, but I don't think they're going to make more money. This might be the year to cash in, and for some teams like Bournemouth, Brighton, this might be a good option as well. I'm starting to think at the moment, is there actually any players we can get that are going to be a cheaper price? And I think if we're looking at midfield targets, I don't think there is money. I don't think there is money regarding that one. So let's have a look at this. What Rob Alls United, always good to see Rob in the chat, says decent players start at 65 million these days. It does seem to be that if you look at this one, so so in January I'd said that this summer would be a midfielders market. Seems only we need a couple. I would say if you're looking at the midfield situation, Real Madrid are looking at trying to sign midfielders. People think that Rodri might go there, but also Manchester City looking to sign midfielders. Wharton is linked with Liverpool. These are all the big clubs in the Premier League. For some reason, I think also I've seen links with Spurs. Chelsea seem to always want players anyway. But if Manchester United, Real Madrid, and Manchester City and Liverpool are looking at midfield options, that's four of the biggest clubs. Like Manchester United and Real Madrid, the biggest clubs in world football. And I think at the moment, in terms of financial muscle, Manchester City and Liverpool, that's probably the four richest clubs in terms of like how much the turnover is. And they're looking at midfielders. There is enough midfielders to go around, but only one person can get Anderson. Only one person's going to be getting Adam Wharton. And Manchester United fans are looking at this and thinking you have to be realistic that if we don't get one of those targets, which we consider category A, it's difficult, isn't it? It's like you have to spend a lot. The one thing that would be genuinely interesting is at this point in time, a lot of people thinking that Anderson will be the most expensive transfer that happens this summer in terms of like maybe from Premier League club to Premier League club. And I've seen people talking about, like, I think privately, some people have messaged me and said they think it's going to be like 110, 120. And I know for a fact that Nottingham Forest want this to be one of the biggest deals ever. Then is that realistic? Like, should he cost like more than Caicedo? I know like Caicedo was a huge amount of money. Should he cost more than Declan Rice? That would be. I'll just look at it and say once you go beyond a certain point, you have to question: is it actually going to be? Is it actually going to be worth going for it? It's difficult to justify it if you need to get three players. I think there's every player's got their price, and I think I've said this: Anderson should be the number one target. But if the price starts getting ridiculous, you do have to look at it and say, actually, there's still good players on the list. It's if Verts was 120 million, it didn't make him a better option than players you could got for a little bit less. This one. I'd say the Bournemouth and Brighton model is to sell their best players, so they've already planned for this and have replacements lined up. This is like really good point, but do you think it's going to be a seller's market or a buyer's market when it comes to midfield players this summer? There is demand, like I said, Manchester United are the key driving force in this, but also Manchester City will be looking at a midfield option. Liverpool will be looking for a midfield option. Real Madrid are looking to reshape their midfield as well. So with that in mind, it's that there's a lot of midfielders going in terms of like clubs there's a lot of midfielders that are going to leave their club, whether it's going to be the options we talk about in the Premier League, the obvious ones we just mentioned, Tonali, Anderson, Baliba, Wharton, etc. You then go to Scott and Gomez and Fernandez. And I'm just trying to think of other examples, but then people talk about Agume, Buwadi, Angela Stiller. There's like, you start hitting double figures and think that there's only going to be one kind of like top signing that all teams go for. Are we going to see like one ridiculous transfer fee? Like, are we going to see insane money go for someone like Tonali or someone like Anderson? And then are these other deals going to be a bit cheaper? Because essentially, if it's 65 million for Scott and Manchester United, I know we're talking about him as being a great option. Will they look at another option and go, actually, we can get that option a bit cheaper? Are Brighton going to be able to get the sort of price tag they wanted for Belieber? if there's like Alex Scott, if Alex Scott is like £20 million cheaper, if Brighton still think they can get 80+ million for Belieber, it's not going to happen. I don't know whether this is like a difficult one. Is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? Really, really tricky to say. So let me jump through some of the comments as well. Do Forest have to sell Anderson if they stay up, win Europa, qualify for the Champions League? This someone actually, I don't know who it was, but someone mentioned this on the channel about 2 days ago, or they might have left a comment on a video. And they said, what happens if Forest win Europa? They're not going to want to sell him, are they? And Anderson will get Champions League football. Then I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't think Nottingham Forest really want to sell. Obviously, they would take like they get a big financial shoot in the arm, wouldn't they? But I suppose it would be very similar. It might be very similar to the situation Spurs were in because if you put Nottingham Forest and a team that has been fighting relegation this season, they're probably actually maybe in exactly the same position Spurs were last season. If you had the Champions League campaign, if I was Forest, you would have to you'd have to get loads more depth in your team. They might be persuaded to sell Anderson to actually try and get numbers in their squad. So, um, I mean, Nottingham Forest are one of these teams that they did get points deduction recently because of like was it last season they got points deduction a couple of times. So I don't think financially they're in the best position. The Champions League money would definitely help, but honestly, no idea what's going to happen regarding this one. Welcome, Jules, to the chat. It says nothing more than 70 for Anderson, in your opinion. Also, I saw Niche Fan. Good to see you, Niche Fan. Thank you for getting involved. Let me know what you're thinking. So Danny B saying the options when you're going a bit cheaper, you've got a few options there that we could look at, which again, I think United are considering those. I'm a bit surprised we didn't consider one a little bit quicker in January and go for them, but no, that's something that they're looking at as well. It might mean that, like Jarvis said, in terms of like selling clubs, I'd imagine, given what we've seen over the last 6 months, Brighton will definitely have a couple of replacements for Belieber lined up, and they're looking at just maximising the price. They might have to be, based on what's happened with previous players leaving Brighton, they might have to accept they're not going to get the price they wanted, and just take the profit you could get from him and move on. How much of a factor would I suppose? Given this, that this is somebody mentioned this. I think Neil mentioned this probably about 2 or 3 days ago, and it has been discussed. It's when you're looking at transfers, the most important things I look for. You're going to see probably the least reliable source is going to be agents pushing stories. Like so, the least reliable source I saw last year was because I like to try and kind of work out what do you think's reliable. The least reliable source was probably Portuguese outlets that were saying Gyökeres and Manchester United sort of implying that Manchester United were making an offer for Gyökeres. That was the least reliable. The most reliable tends to come from if Manchester United have got players that they can buy, who does Vavell want to sign? And also, when you see a story coming out from like Cunha or Mbeumo saying they want to join Manchester United, they're definitely very credible stories because ultimately, I think Alex Scott's had a very good season. He's a young player with a lot of potential. He's playing in a team which probably defies the odds considering the players that left last season. You see Semenyo leave, you see Kirkes, and you see Houston. All these good players that have left Bournemouth. The manager's coming out with a lot of credit. The players individually are coming out with a lot of credit. They're doing exactly what exactly what Brentford do, exactly what Brighton do. They're doing the same sort of thing. They bring players in. They've got really good scouting. These players are quality, but they do stay at the club for a couple of years, then get sold on as a model. And we saw Brentford do exactly the same thing. They sold Wissa, they sold Mbeumo, and they've got another player at the club now that's hitting loads of goals. And we saw it a few years ago. People wondered what was going to happen when Tony left Brentford, and then we suddenly, people start talking about Wison and Wemo. People are wondering now what's going to happen, and maybe they're going to have to sell their striker again because he's scoring a lot of goals this season. So it's that these clubs have a conveyor belt and do move players on quickly. And at the moment, you look at it. When I saw stories last season about Delap favouring Chelsea because of the Champions League, he moved to Chelsea, and it was like, okay, right, we saw the story. He favoured a move because of that reason, and that's where he went. And at the moment, if Manchester United see Alex Scott as a player they want, I think they can get him. I don't think it's going to have to cost the amount that Bournemouth want. I think there's a slightly cheaper deal. I'm not going to say we can get a really cheap deal because that's not going to happen. There will be certain market value which you're going to have to accept, you're going to have to pay. But I think there's definitely room for negotiation. It's a positive thing, isn't it? That I'm starting to think now, is there actually any other players we can sign for the women's team which helps us save money in the men's team? Possibly a new strategy. But no, if Alex Scott looks at Man United and says, look, also, if you think of this is a box ticking exercise, and the question that I'm answering that people might have forgotten by now, the question is going to be how much of a factor is his stepsister playing for the Manchester United women's team. I think it's a big factor because there's going to be maybe a few main factors regarding where players decide to play. One is going to be, can you win trophies? Manchester United, we have won trophies quite recently. Okay, the cup trophies. Are we getting closer to winning other trophies? At the moment, I wouldn't ever say we're going to be in a competitive title race next season. But domestically, there's always a chance. Over the next 4 or 5 years, we should be getting closer. No, we should in the next few years with good transfer windows. You can't really rule it out. We could have the same sort of trajectory as Arsenal, where maybe 2 or 3 years down the line, we're regularly in a title race. That's kind of what we're hoping for. But I think next season is too soon. And then if you look at financially, any of the teams like Manchester United, Liverpool, Arsenal, definitely Man City as well, you're going to be very, very financially rewarded. And then the other thing is going to be, is there any ties to particular areas in the UK you want to live? London's usually a big factor, but if that's not a factor, and it doesn't seem to be in this case, I think it's definitely a good sign because the offers will be relatively similar. I think it's pretty good. Um, so let's have a look at go for some of the comments. Also, Wids are better. Good to see you, and hopefully you're feeling even better tonight. There was a question actually. If this is about a story that I saw regarding saying there was a few options regarding players from Leeds, and saying your summer transfers you're looking at. You got Stat, you got Tonali, you got Alex Scott. Then they would probably be Yeah, they would probably be definitely on Manchester United's say short list and on the more likely side of that because I think everybody that's watching and talking about transfers and everyone that's interested in transfers, it looks at it and thinks actually if Anderson's going to be difficult, Tonali's probably the one that we might go for. Like Tonali feels like a deal that Man United can get done. That he's going to be expensive, but it feels like a deal that we can get done. Hopefully he would cost less than Anderson if Anderson goes to City. And then after the rest of that, that you're looking at when um, you look at Alex Scott, Anton Stack, you look at those two players as, yeah, they're the sort of players Manchester United are looking at. We're looking at players that are up to the physical demands of the Premier League, but also younger players that will improve. So, in terms of Ineos, this ticks every box, doesn't it? And this is why I think these are credible signings. Maybe like a month ago, people were messaging me saying they think Fernandez at West Ham should be definitely on the list. And again, it might be that he's on the list. Would Leeds to sell to us? 100% they would, wouldn't they? I mean, in the past, like we got Eric Cantona very cheap, but then they made us pay for Rio, didn't they? I think in the end, Rio kind of forced the deal through. So no, Leeds are going to be like obviously they don't like Manchester United, and that goes without saying. But again, there's a lot of precedents there. Players moving from Leeds to Manchester. The fact you're actually living in that area of the UK already, and we've had players go from, say, from like a few players go from Manchester United to Leeds as well. I mean, Smith went to come to United as well, and we sent them a few players. I think like Lee Sharp and Strachan spring to mind as like players that have gone from Manchester United to Leeds. So transfers have happened between the clubs in the past. Probably not so much recently, but then Leeds have been a championship team for a lot of the last decade, so that's probably a factor. But you wouldn't get a cheap deal. But I think you would definitely there would definitely be transfers between the clubs. And so to go back to the price, which is definitely the factor. So with Alex Scott posturing at 65 million, it's maybe a preview of where clubs are positioning their asking prices and saying, if you look at this, then this is why I was saying that when you look at the top signings, like the top signings, if they're going to be about 100 million, and that's what people are thinking. And again, it is inflated because the Champions League money is basically pushing prices up. That the top clubs have more money, and Champions League prize money is crazy. Like the Club World Cup money as well, crazy. And Manchester United probably need to spend to get back into those competitions. Like if we go in the World Club Cup and do well, that's extra money. I'm not sure what that's going to happen with that competition, but clearly Champions League money will definitely. Well, no, we need to get that. But it does go to show that Anderson and Tonali feel like the premier signings, don't they, at the moment of 100 million, sort of that kind of price tag. I'm starting to think that I don't know what Wharton's going to cost. I did think that he might possibly be like, say, last summer we were talking about 80 million for him. I'm not going to say 80 million is cheap, but it seems to be that might be that Adam Wharton might have slightly less competition, and that might lower the price slightly. I did see another comment as well saying that it would be good to try and get these deals done before the World Cup. With Tonali not playing in the World Cup, that's another factor where I think that's leaning towards that might be a deal to try and get done a bit earlier as well. But what you might see is that all the clubs are looking at it and thinking if you're the top midfield target this summer, you're going to start looking at the sort of prices for Caicedo and Declan Rice. That's going to be the benchmark for the top signings. And then if you look at, I think Belieber would have to drop into the same category as Alex Scott. Belieber would not be £100 million player. It might have been something that they could have got close to that last season if there was other teams interested and they were willing to spend that sort of money, but he'd have to drop down into this sort of category. And I would say that if you're looking at spending less than 60 million, you're probably looking at Fernandez, Gomez, and then you probably have to look at what options you got in the say the Bundesliga or in France where you could get a bit more value. And I think that's why Angela Stiller is one player that I think Angela Stiller will be something that will be gone. Dan James, how did I forget Dan James? Dan James, like Dan James for a profit is the kind of thing I think with Dan James. I forgot about that one. If you're living, Gregory, I can't remember the what's the area in Leeds that's the cricket ground. I forget what it's called now. It's Headingley, isn't it? Headingley. If you're a Leeds football player, you don't live in Leeds. You live in like an expensive area outside of Leeds. But and it's the same as if you wherever you are as a football player, you're going to live in like an expensive area, aren't you? No, but that's true. And say 22 years of age, you'd rather a bit more experience. So I will just talk about this and say that 22 years of age, it's really difficult to have a blanket view. If you consider Toby Collier is 22 years of age, and he might have played about 8 games for Man United and has been loaned out. And then if you look at Buardi's massively rated across Europe. He's 18. But when he's 22, he'll probably be at a top club, but he will have had like 5 years of experience. And 22 for me, you look at Alex Scott. He's been at Bournemouth. He's done really well at Bournemouth, but he was prior to that, he was in the Championship and he was player of the season for Bristol City. So you're looking at a player that, as a younger player, was player of the season and he's just improving. So I can't take that. I agree with what you're saying, but in terms of 22 years of age, then Anderson's like younger, isn't he? then and if you look at this, that 22 years of age, he could have been in an academy since like the age of 6 or 7. He's been playing like football for essentially about 15 years. And I can't remember how many years ago he signed from Bristol City, but we're talking about a few years of experience in physical leagues. So, yeah, experience wise, like at 22, he's not going to be the same level of experience, but he's already got a lot of experience in top flight football. And I think it's, but what you're looking at, just to say in terms of like I don't know, a total transfer window, but one player's 22 years of age, and I did say as well, and I think we're going to be agreeing on this point, hopefully, that Manchester United losing Casemiro, he was really, he's really experienced. You can't, it's unbelievable amount of experience he's got. Then I've made this point as well, saying, and I'm agreeing with Cake. I'm agreeing that we do need to have experience in midfield, but I'm only talking about one player here. We should hopefully be signing three, and that's what that should be Manchester United's midfield sort of transfer situation. And if you're looking at this is kind of this is why I think the transfer window's got a certain shape about it. That Manchester United will be looking at a player like an Alex Scott that might be that sort of age, that level of experience, then when you start looking at which players are around that have got more experience, Tonali seems to be the guy, doesn't he? Like Tonali seems to be one of the only players we're linked to at the moment. You could say Angela Stiller is maybe a little bit older than some of the targets, but probably Tonali is the only one that's mid 20s that would be uh, a lot more experienced at international level, and particularly this season, Tonali playing in the Champions League as well, and has already lifted a trophy with Newcastle. I think Tonali seems like the best option. The only other player that was on the radar was probably Edison at Atalanta, and that's gone very cold in terms of like as a news story. So I think you're right, Cake, that when you've got when you've got signings, and I think if you're listening to what I'm saying, I think you are agreeing that Tonali could come in as the experienced signing of the summer. Like Tonali would be one of the best options, and then you could look at building around them. Like for example, Angela Stiller has got a lot of experience, but he's been playing in the Bundesliga. And if you're looking at Manchester United signing potentially Alex Scott, he doesn't need to necessarily be a starter either. And so that's great, Gregory. Good point. A good point with this one. Would Alex Scott be signed to be our starter or as a backup in our midfield? And say, is Scott the best United can do for a starter? I don't think Scott is the best United can do for a starter. That's why I think the factor about this is going to be how much do you spend? That's why we're talking about. If you can get him for a bit cheaper than Bournemouth want to spend or want us to spend, then you can get more signings. But no, if he was signed, I think in all reality, Manchester United would be looking at possibly he would be more of a backup, wouldn't he? More of a backup. So let me have a look because I am also agreeing with a lot of people in the chat. I'm agreeing that I do think it's that United need to invest pretty big. So I would say Fishal is one of the lesser credible sources, Jim. So don't worry too much about that. It would be no unlikely unlikely. And so playing at the very top clubs isn't the same kind. It's a different pressure regarding this one. I suppose you're looking at it and thinking that this is kind of why Manchester United are probably considering things, but also you do have to actually look at it and say what they're going to be doing. And if you're looking at the pressure situation, I suppose the example is going to be Manchester United have got Aiden Heaven and Yoro, who are 19 and 20, and they're having to cope with the pressure. So I think it's something that you're going to have to cope with the pressure. Kobe Mainu is younger than that as well. He came through as a teenager. So it might be, no one knows if he's going to be ready for the pressure, but you have to look at him performing well in the Premier League, and that's all you can judge him by. Stephanie's saying this exact same comment as well, saying that playing for Bournemouth and playing for United, are completely different. And so look at Kirkez's move to Liverpool. Also, I think with Kirkez, young player, I think Liverpool actually moved on. Like I think Liverpool actually I know people don't really like Trent, and they don't really didn't really rate some of Liverpool's players, but he was good for Liverpool. He was a good signing, a good player, and one of their key players when they've been winning trophies. And I think Kirkez is always going to be a little bit of a change. I think also with the drop off of most, like Liverpool got different issues. Like it's not just one player. They changed quite a few players, and it's not worked out so far. But it is true. It is true. I think when you have a very well organised team like Bournemouth, the players looked very good. The demands for Liverpool are different to Bournemouth, also in terms of what they need to do. Like they're playing differently as well. I think Kirkez was like quite attacking, but it's different. I could see at the moment Man United were looking at Kirkez a year ago, or fans were looking at him, and I think sometimes you have to look at. We don't know how good a player Adams is going to be, but we don't have say also Alex Scott. We don't know if Alex Scott is going to be brilliant, but again, he might not have to be a starter week in week out. So looking at someone had a question regarding this and saying if Alex Scott's profile is a direct comparison to Mainu, would they spend 65 million on a rotational player? Then I don't think Man United would spend 65 million on Scott. I think Bournemouth wants 65 million, and I think Manchester United will try and get the price down a bit. It might be that they're looking at United have said, actually, was it Ornstein or somebody? A few people have said recently that Manchester United will be looking for players that play alongside Mainu, but also could play instead of Mainu. Like you do need some rotation. If you consider it, at the moment, Mainu was missing last game. He has missed a reasonable amount of games, which is a bit of a concern. But I think primarily they'll look for someone to play alongside Mainu, but they might also be looking for someone that are they going to be looking at starting one in the Champions League, one in the Premier League? You have to look. You have to probably look at it and say we're going to have to rotate a bit more than we have been doing. And as a rotational option, I think the rotational option would actually pay a lot of money. Like it would when we're talking about rotation options, we've only played what like just over 40 games this season. Actually, it might be 40 games, isn't it? But we didn't do much in the FA Cup or the League Cup this season. And if you factor in, we might play say like I don't know 55 games next season or more, then you would look at it and say if you're a rotational option, you might be playing way more games anyway. You might be starting a lot of games. I think the difficulty is I love these options, but like Wharton, like there's no way that Wharton's going to be a rotational option. Like Gregory, Wharton is like so much better than Agate. He should be starting, like he should be a starter. And I think with Wharton, that where was he going to go is something that we might talk about at some point because some of these players that how do you go from being one of the best players in Crystal Palace or one of the best players in Nottingham Forest or one of the best players in a couple of other clubs as well we're talking about and do you want are you going to choose the club you go to based on making sure you get games. If you're a midfield player, like you're not going to be looking at going to Chelsea, you're not going to be going to Arsenal. You're probably going to be looking at Man City, preferably if Man City move on Rodri. If Man City are just looking at getting depth, then maybe that's not the best option. But Manchester United at the moment, then I think we're in a strong position in some regards that we're going to offer first team football for some of the top targets. We're not going to be looking at rotational options for big money. I think the rotational options will be like Hayden Hackney would definitely be that. I would say that Gomez would be that as well. And I think when you start looking at 65 million, they got to be playing a significant amount of games. So you think United have put themselves in the corner by saying they're building a team around Mainu? At this point in time, I don't know if there's any players at the club we should be building around. Like you say, we've got lots of players at the club. I don't think we should be building the team around one person. I think we need to be just getting complementary pieces. And depending on which are available, then everyone's going to have their own view, aren't they? So just as a quick question, if you could sign two or three midfielders, what would you go for? I know we saw Jarvis's pick early on, but what would you go for if you can sign three players? You've got to be realistic though. You can't have Anderson, Tonali plus Belieber. You're going to have some players that are a little bit cheaper. If Anderson, say if United acquire Anderson, then Wharton will not in front of him, and he has too similar to play besides Anderson in midfield. It's kind of difficult, isn't it? I think with Anderson, you get a lot of skill in terms of well, you get a lot of positives from that, don't you? You get definitely a lot of cover for defense. You get ball, someone that's going to win the ball back a lot. You get someone that is incredibly mobile. And I think if you're looking at Manu, he's not the quickest around the pitch, but he is very good in possession. Someone like Anderson would suit Manchester United, I think, a lot. He wins the ball back incredibly incredible. It's not even close in terms of who wins the ball back most in the Premier League. Anderson is levels above everybody, and then he's pretty good with the ball as well. That's probably one of the reasons that we're looking at him as going to be a good option. And I think with this one, that's saying how do you put it? Say Manu needs time, not a pedestal. Manu is yeah, he's definitely one of these people that is a good player, but it's very difficult to like if you ask people what they think of Manu, you usually get one option that is like overly negative or one option that's a bit overly positive. Like in real terms, he's a player that just needs to develop, and we don't know what his ceiling is. We know he's like good at some things. We know that he needs to work on some things. I think it's people that sometimes you get a bit carried away with the hype and go a bit crazy. So anyway, this is your opportunity. If you want to put three players out there, just have a look at. We kind of guess how much they're going to cost as well. Cheers, Bilal. Appreciate that, Bilal. Hopefully, see you in the evening stream. I'm trying to work on setting up a watch long if possible, but it might depend on like guest hosts being available. Otherwise, I'm going to be setting up for post match. There'll definitely be a stream at 10 p.m. I'm hoping there's a watch long, but it does kind of require bit of help with that one. Gregory says Anderson, Stiller, and Gomez. That like financially, that's a good match. Anderson's your top price. Angela Stiller, I think, is 50 million euros. Gomez is probably a bit similar price, maybe slightly cheaper. So I think you can get those three done for 200 million. So that would be in line with like three midfielders, and it feels a little bit like you've got a budget of about 200 million spent on midfield is like my best estimation, and you need to sign three players, and I think that would work. You could look at it and say you could replace Stiller. I think you could replace Stiller with say you could replace him with Alex Scott, and it would still work. I think you could replace Stiller with probably Belieber if Brighton aren't crazy and make it still work financially. You could replace Anderson with Tonali as well as another option. And I think with Gomez, how much is Gomez going to cost? It might be, is it going to be like 40-ish as well? I think it's going to be something along those lines. Welcome to chat, Mr. B. And as a Brentford fan who, yeah, Brentford, I suppose that for the first time in a while, Brentford, I don't think there's lots of Brentford players that are going to be linked to Manchester United at the moment. So at the moment, we're linked to players from a lot of other teams, though. It said you should get Scott. I think he's. They say you wish that we could buy him. Yeah, I think the price. I think a lot of people are looking at the deal that they did when he was playing for Bristol City and thinking, can you imagine like Hayden Hackney as well? With Hayden Hackney, the price is pretty much 30 million at the moment, or it was in. Yeah, the price was in January 30 million. And loads of people have been looking at Hackney as well and saying, what happens if Hackney goes to a Premier League club next season and plays well for a season? He's going to be like 45, 50 as a minimum. It's going to be the price is going to shoot up. If Man United don't sign Hackney, it'll be they must just not rate him. And at the moment, there's people talking about Garner again, and we don't seem to have been doing too much. So Wharton's still a similar profile, says Danny B. Do you think this one that people will consider Wharton not necessarily the paciest, but in terms of like that in possession, pretty good? I mean, what would you say are the best attributes of Angela Stiller? I've seen people talking about him in terms of range of passing is very good, and I think Wharton's definitely very good passing wise. People used to look at this 12 months ago and say Wharton and Belieber might be a good mix. They were potentially Man United's top targets 12 months ago. If we, you know, if players had still carried on with the same trajectory, and they might have looked at that sort of situation. And I think if you're of the mind that it would be a mistake for Angela Stiller to not get signed by Man United, I think the good news is that Christopher Babel also thinks this. So it's taken a little bit of time to actually get an actual price from Stuttgart. I do believe actually somebody mentioned this recently. I think Stuttgart have actually bought the release clause back from Angela Stiller now, so we could be in line with actually getting a price. Angela Stiller, I think, is going to enjoy a nice pay rise, and but he's going to be. I think they're going to be looking at 50, so 50 million. I think that's going to be about the price they're putting on there. And given that the only kind of option is going to be is that Real Madrid are also interested as well. So Real Madrid could be interested in Angela Stiller and Alex Scott. Spurs are heavily linked with Scott as well. So is the better? That's why I kind of look at the screen and say Spurs were quite heavily linked with Embuemo as well. Lots of people pushing out stories about Embuemo to Spurs. And also, I think at the time, loads of people were pushing stories about Semenyo to Spurs as well. This is going back to last summer. And I thought at the time that Spurs were linked to our targets, but the targets didn't want to join Spurs, so it was kind of like not really a problem. And at the moment, Spurs are linked to Alex Scott, but so Spurs might be a relegation. No, Spurs might be a championship team. So um, at the moment in time, I'm not sure who Spurs are playing on this weekend, but Spurs could be relegated. So the fact that Spurs might be actually struggling to keep their players next season rather than signing players. So I don't know. And when I saw a story that the Glazers might buy Spurs, can you imagine anything worse than being relegated and then being bought by the Glazers? That would be, I mean, it kind of makes it slightly more likely if they go to the Championship. They might be cheaper. They should bounce back. I don't know whether are the Glazers allowed to own Spurs in the Championship and own Manchester United. I don't know. I know they couldn't own them both in the Premier League, but no, I'm hoping that happens kind of because it'd be bad for Spurs, but it'd be a good way of getting rid of them from our club. I don't think Ineos can afford to buy them out, but it might kind of open the doorway to someone actually coming in from abroad, which would be quite good, quite nice to report on after years of moaning. So Alex Scott watched, yeah. Any feedback on Alex Scott? Let me know. It does seem to be that there's a couple of people that I was trying to think of a few people that were disagreeing. Interestingly, there's a few players we've talked about recently. Some people will look at Alex Scott as being a good signing. Some people think he's too expensive. There's definitely, I think Tonali's a divided opinion a little bit, and also I think Gomez is one that divided opinion a bit yesterday. So I don't think there's going to be too much and saying, yeah, I don't think they come as a deal, Ryan. I think the one we're looking at is probably not the one you're thinking of. But so I'll do a poll in the comments. This is one where we'll get a quick view of people's opinions. So let me just get this set up. The price tag that Bournemouth want, I'm just going to reiterate, they want 65 million. Should Manchester United pay that? If that becomes the price, should we do it? So, given in mind that everyone's got some favourite targets, so let me just put the poll up. So, should United pay? So again, this is one where let's take a snapshot of people watching and see what people think. Like, should United pay 65 million for Scott? Then we'll be able to get a vote on this one. Don't forget that if they spend 65 million on Scott, that is 65 million they can't spend on other people. So there is obviously going to be somewhat limited funds for the whole of the team. But should United spend, say, pay 65 million for Scott, is going to be the question of the day. If they do that, then potentially this is a deal that can get done early on in the transfer window. I don't think it's going to be too difficult. But please vote on that one. Also, if you're new to the channel, please don't forget to click the subscribe button. We're getting pretty close to 500, which is good news. And hopefully we'll be able to get back to where we want to be as soon as possible. So no, Gregory, exactly. Christopher Bell is banging the drum, and he has a bigger drum than we have, and that's going to be definitely definitely. This is why my guess is we're going to sign Angela Stiller. I think we're going to sign him. So given this one, it's close, isn't it? It's not an easy decision. Like it's not an easy decision. Danny says he's probably worth it in his opinion. So you probably lean towards the yes. Then I would like to see another season of Scott at Bournemouth, which I think is fair. I think is fair. I think that's Cake. I'll answer the question in like say 5 or 10 minutes. I'll let people vote first. I don't want to bias the vote. I want it to be like a free, impartial vote and see what people are thinking. But would you pay 65 million for Scott? I mean, I would also say if you think 65 million is too much, but you think 60 is fine or 55 is fine, then it's not a lot of difference, is it? Given like grand scheme of things, and say 65 million is the equivalent of say 35 to 40 million. Maybe like if you go back 5 years, if you consider the expansion of the Champions League and how much more money there is in football, then the transfer fees, it is becoming like almost almost a situation where when you spend 40 million, it's considered like a cheap, like 40 million for a rotation option. Doesn't that's the sort of price that City pay for a player that then literally just doesn't play. So it's not big anymore, is it? But when you look at the players signing, Man United are signing players that are going to be first team players. Last season, they're all 65 plus. Whereas if you went back 10 years, that's big money. Like we start talking about Cristiano Ronaldo money when he went to Madrid. Um, but yes, so if you think about how much was Schneidling about that sort of money, when you start thinking about that sort of price, then if you were to take if you take him for 55, I think that's probably like maybe you should just go. They're going to cost a bit more. For context, Alanga was 60 million. We had trying to think the other Gittins was 60 million. So midfield players do cost a lot. I'm not trying to influence you. I'm just trying to say that 65 million, you have to look at market value and say that that's kind of seems to what they're costing. So playing in the Premier League, having a good season, 22 years old, lots of potential. It's like this is kind of where the price is going. You're not going to get him for 40 million. You're not going to get him for 45 million. It's crazy. Crazy. These are the factors, aren't they? Premier League. If when we're talking about Boadi's 18. When we're talking about a price for Diamonde's like halfway through his Diamonde's like halfway through his like breakout season, isn't he? So crazy, crazy. So yeah, it makes a difference, but you have to look at it in the long scheme of things. Um, I don't know how old you are, Ryan, but that's a reasonable range, isn't it? That's quite a lot. Uh, I think every transfer deal would be over at least 3 years, amortized over like 3 to 4 years. I think the payments. So, yeah, and again, Man United will be selling players as well. So it's interesting. I think this will possibly divide opinion. I can't see the results at the moment, but please, at this point in time, if you're able to share the stream on socials, make sure you do that as well. I think at the moment the channel's had about 80 shares across every stream, so as much as possible would be great. And say United tax. I think there's like if you think about this, like Man United tax. Did Liverpool get taxed last season on Isak and Verts? And did like now, is there basically I think United tax is it still a thing? or is there? I think there's a Premier League tax. I think there's a Premier League tax on teams at the top of the league now, and we saw Ekitike cost a fortune. And if you consider Ekitike, Isak, Wirtz, I think the Liverpool tax must be a thing as well. And maybe what we're seeing is like Liverpool and Manchester United do operate within the rules. So maybe that's why we're paying a bit more. And teams that are a little bit, let's put it, the teams that have actually been prosecuted for breaking the rules, Chelsea, they seem to get some suspiciously get deals done, don't they? So maybe there's a reason, like if you play within the rules, you're actually paying a bit more. Interesting to see if they actually finally sort out the City issues. So I see Newcastle are looking to offload Whistle already, willing to take a 35 million loss. Wow. He went for too much money as well. But I can't actually remember Whistle doing anything this season. It was a crazy panic buy, wasn't it, right at the end of the window? And so I wonder why we haven't been linked to, say, Jensen at Brentford. He's been really good this season. He's on a free this summer, decent rotational option. This is kind of yeah, this is a good one actually. That this is someone that ticks some boxes, but also it's very, very low risk, isn't it? When we start looking at a few signings, and I've seen like signings being linked to in terms of other deals as well. If he signed a new deal, then that might be a factor. But no, there's definitely I've seen a few deals now with centre back options that United might be looking at potentially trying to get. Now, maybe trying to get actually a cheap deal done, which I don't mind. And what is it bet? It's a no from you. He's not an improvement on Mainu. Then, and I think that people that are looking at him, like I'm kind of 50-50 regarding this one, but I'll say if it's 65 million, I think that's a bit much. I would probably go right. So if I had to make a decision today on Alex Scott for 65 million, I'd be hoping Man United can edge the price down a little bit because I would be going down the route of you go for your top target, whichever that is. You probably spend 100 plus million, 110, whatever it's going to cost, and you get that player in. And then I would be looking at saying that Christopher Vell is really pushing Angela Stiller, and I think his track record of identifying good players has been it's been decent. So I would go right, Vell. We'll get Angela Stiller in, and then I'd look around it and go right. What other options have we got? And I'm not sure we'd have 65 million left to spend. So how much would I be willing to pay? It's difficult, isn't it? Because his valuation for Bournemouth is going to be not with really in line with mine. I would say if you can lower it by 10, I think it's a good option. I mean, we still need to see if with Mainu, it's very young as well. That maybe Man United, like, does Mainu want to stay at Man United his whole career? That's a bit of an unknown. And if Mainu misses games, I think in terms of the situation, I think United do need quality. If we could get him for say 50-55, I'd be like, okay, that's for me. I think that's good. I think if it starts being above that, it's a tricky one. It's tricky. I mean, to be honest, I will say this: like now that Alex Scott is like firmly on the radar with a lot of us, we've got a few games left to watch this season. Then, I mean, I'll do a bit more research and come back. But at the moment, I'd say I think we'd probably look at other options at the moment. So maybe that. But let's go look into the chat, see what people are voting. So you got like another couple of minutes if you want to vote. At the moment, no is winning, which is kind of probably where I'm at that price point. But I think he's good. I think he's a good player. But I think we need to spend three. I think we need to sign three players. That's why, as I'm saying, that's why I'd probably make a decision regarding that one. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a bit like this conversation where I think Man United want to sign Carlos Baleba, but I think it might not happen because Brighton want too much. So yeah, the squad is already trimmed. So to take people's views and as a snapshot, this was the poll we got, and we're only 15 away from hitting 500 subscribers as well. So make sure you get involved if you just tuned in. The poll's got 19 votes, so hopefully the video's got 19 likes. So the poll's only running 10 minutes. So big up to everybody that's got involved. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well. All content's free on the channel. And 19 people voted. And should United pay 65 million for Scott? No, say 68. So an overwhelming no. And I'll say this for people that don't always watch this channel or haven't or are new to this channel, most of the time when we do a vote on a transfer story, then I'm going to try and from now on, every time we do a discussion about whether we should sign a player, I'm going to try and get a value that we think is like essentially what it's going to cost, whether it's coming out from Bournemouth today or whether it's coming out from realistic journalists as well. Because otherwise, everybody wants to sign loads of players, but when you actually look at which, how much they're going to cost, I think we might change our opinion slightly. And I think he probably would cost that one. And say he's easily on the same level as Mainu, says Danny. Okay, is that that's Jensen at Bournemouth? But I think United, if we're looking at signing Angela Stiller plus Tonali, which seems to be like where the news is kind of going this way, or if we're trying to get possibly Wharton, possibly another option, I think for another midfielder, which I mean Alex Scott is certainly on the radar, as Ornstein's saying, he's certainly once being considered. And I say, but when you look at Ornstein, he's usually one of the good sources to look at. And I think he's definitely one not to be written off. So I just put the Ornstein article back up. He's definitely not one to be written off. But I think a lot of it's going to come down to what's going to happen regarding the price, and he might be. This might kind of put the pressure a little bit on Brighton that if they want to sell Belieber to Manchester United, maybe they need to be a bit more realistic about the price because otherwise he's going to stay at Brighton. They won't be able to cash in. So yeah, looking at this, that midfielders will be at a premium this summer. I do believe that as well. Is it a seller's market? This is my question. Is it a seller's market or a buyer's market? There's loads of midfielders available. There's loads of teams looking at midfielders. Does the power lie with teams like Bournemouth, teams like Brighton, or does the power lie with teams like Manchester United that have multiple options? What do people think? Like, if it comes down to a tough negotiation and Bournemouth are looking for 65, Manchester United see 55 as the top, what's most likely to happen? Are Manchester United going to have to pay the extra because that the market demands that, and the clubs can keep these players, or are these clubs obliged to actually lower the price? Otherwise, Man United will go elsewhere. So, is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? Is what my question was going to be. And Rizbet says definitely a seller's market. It does seem to be, like you said, it does seem to be that they're starting to set their stalls out regarding how much they want. And the big news 2 days ago was Nottingham Forest saying they want a record transfer fee for Anderson. If Anderson goes for a record transfer fee, like sort of Florian Wirtz money, I think suddenly 65 is going to seem like, yeah, pay the price. You know what I mean? That when I've said today, I don't think I wouldn't spend that sort of money. It does make me think that as soon as one deal gets done, do you remember when I said this myself? When Elanga and when Gittins went for 60 million, I was like, right, whatever Embuemo costs, get him in. Like he's better player than that. It's yeah, 100%. Jarvis saying you're wondering if people actually watch Scott play. So the energy he brings is immense, technique is flawless. So tidy player and profiles like his are crucial in any team. Then I think a lot of people, I suppose this one, Jarvis, is there's people that will, I think sometimes with football is that people will look at, that if you really want Manchester United to sign Anderson, maybe they're a bit dismissive of other players. If you really want Tonali, people might be looking around and going, actually, is he worth that sort of money? It's no, he's. I think I said this. I think Scott's very good, but I'm not sure he's going to be. This is nothing against Scott. I think Scott's a very good player. I think United might be looking to, if they're looking at signing, say, Tonali first and Angela Stiller, I think they might be looking to try and sign a player that's going to be less money than the money that Bournemouth want. But no, if they don't get Anderson and Tonali, maybe this is a better option than Angela Stiller. But again, people that really want Angela Stiller will see him as the best option. It's tricky. That my point was going to be he's a good player, and if we got him, I would be really positive. How old's Angela Stiller? Good question, actually. If anyone can just post it in the comments, because I don't want to open too many more windows. Danny says you prefer, okay, 24. I was going to guess 24. I wasn't 100% sure. Big up to you, Jordan. Good to see you, my friend. Don't forget to share the stream if you've just tuned in as well. Don't forget to subscribe if you are new. We're pushing back towards 500. Let's try and hit that in the next couple of days. That would be great. So 25. The question is, would City going for Scott? Answer is probably no. If I was Scott, there is literally no chance I sign for City because they'll probably buy a big name as well. And I'm just trying to think. There's been a lot of players that go to City. If you're not going to be like the biggest name in the transfer window, then I would be a bit concerned. I mean, there's a lot of players at Man City that kind of disappear into their squad. So I would say that like unless you think you're going to be first, like your first team top signing, then I would say no. Welcome United, so die. Is Ryan still in the chat? Just a quick question. If like Berber's still in the chat, because I also wanted to say something which made me laugh when I was watching your stream yesterday. If you're in the chat, just like post like any sort of comment, because I'm just going to say something that you said as well, and it's definitely a streaming thing. Like not a joke, but it's just something that people think about when they're live streaming. So he turned 25 10 days ago. So, see, when I last looked at Angela Stiller, it probably was a couple of weeks ago, and I did look at it and say, you're at 24 years old. Because in my mind, when people like Cake say about experience, I was kind of thinking in my mind, Tonali, Edison, and Angela Stiller are just a few years older, a few years more experienced than players like Belieber, Anderson, Wharton, etc. So in my mind, I was looking at it thinking I would like to sign one of those players with a bit more experience. That would be perfect for me. I'll be up to you, Ryan. This is what I was going to say. That when a couple of people just joined the chat, and this is like for Debasis and United Side Die, when I'm doing a live stream and you start thinking, okay, right, the live stream's been going on a while, you go, right, let's have a, no, and think, right, if I'm going to draw things to a conclusion, and then when a couple of people come in, the first thing my mind thinks of is, I can't just end the stream now when people have just come in. So I would say for people that just come in, I have been talking a lot about this, and I don't want to repeat many things I've said. So, but I will take your views on board. If you've got some opinions on what you're thinking, so give me Scott over Tonali. Well, that's a big shout. Should I put a poll in the comments about who would you sign, Scott or Tonali? Because that's like a heavyweight battle, like taking on Tonali. Um, Forget the price. We're gonna do like yeah, forget the price. Best option: Tonali, Scott, or Scott. That's a tricky one, isn't it? That's a tricky one. I'm not going to put Anderson in there, but I'm just going to put these two players because we talked about Scott loads today, and that's probably that's a good one. That's a good one. Debasis, you were lurking. Why were you lurking? You could have posted your comment. No, I don't mind you lurking. That's fine. I remember actually when we get back to monetization and when sometimes people like do a gift membership or something, sometimes people get flagged up. Do you think I didn't even know you're watching? Okay, so Danny B says, "Give me Scott over Tonali." Do people agree with that? Like, do people agree that he would be a better one? So, budget wise, 150 for midfielders plus an Agate sale gives you like 180 plus. I think that's what we see. I think we look at trying to get three players and trying to get them in to that kind of budget. I think, given that we spent about that money, a little bit more on three attacking players, I think we might be looking at that as well. And welcome to chat, Ian. Ian says, Yeah, be careful. Thanks for listening, Ian. Make sure that we don't distract you. So we won't be doing any crazy takes to distract you driving. But in terms of like, say, Scott's a yes for you. You're saying 50 million is that kind of price tag. You got Wharton at 60 million, Gomez say 30 million. I think the price might edge up a little bit on some of those, but it's going to be as a guide. I think the order's right. I think Wharton's going to cost the most. Then you're going to have Scott being a bit cheaper, and you're going to have Gomez potentially a bit cheaper regarding that one. So yeah, it's going to be yeah potentially. And if you want to like build a budget, then you got all this money as well. I've seen nothing about Greenwood recently, but we've got like a 50 to 60% sell-on clause in that deal. So that could be quite big money coming in, essentially from us doing nothing. And then you've got the Rashford money. Eventually, that will happen. I think Xerxes, Agate, Rasmus Højlund, Anana, Bindia, like none of those are crazy, but they're all bits of money coming in. This is the first window for like, I can't remember a window where we've actually got significant money coming in for so long. Hoyland's going to be 40 plus million euros. Xerxes, I think we'll be getting like 30, 35 million. You're looking at Agate and you're looking at Anana. I think there's lots of money coming in. So the poll's surprisingly close. And so I thought it might be quite close, mainly because I wasn't sure what people would think. It's always good to have like a close poll, though it makes it a bit more interesting. If I do a poll saying like, should we sign Anderson, it's literally pointless because it's going to be like so so much so obvious what the answer is going to be. So Tonali has not impressed enough in so many games. That makes me say go get him, and he's 100 million plus. So 100 million, that might be the price as well. But I think we could get it done for a bit cheaper. I mean, United Dice says you might as well try and go and get Garner over Scott based on like is Garner someone that's going to be out of contract soon? Is that the situation? I'm trying to think how long he's been at Everton for. But I thought there was definitely a story that Everton were trying to get him on a new contract, which made me think possibly there's a deal to be done. Then I don't know whether Man United would do that because that would be the mission that they messed up, wouldn't it? It would be the mission that we messed up and got that. Scott and Amundsen. Is there a player called Amundsen? Like you're like let him know. But then yeah, get the thumbnail made already. Get the horses and the huskies on the thumbnail. Yeah, as a Norwegian, then I guess you're going to go for. Is that going to put you off Scott? Then no, that's an interesting one. But no, Garner's out of contract. Not sure where we stand with him though. No, as a fan base, I think people are quite say is it extended. I'm not sure it's a done deal. If you're Garner, then there's options available, isn't there? Um, no disrespect to Everton. This is what I remember when Manchester United sold Garner to Everton and the deal was like completed. I messaged an Everton fan who I've reconnected with recently, and at the time, this is going back no back years, but at the time, he said that we hadn't made a mistake. He didn't think Garner would. He thought Garner was good, but he didn't see Garner improving like he has been doing recently. So Everton fans were no. At the time, you have to make a judgment call, and at the time, I think Man United fans think we got something wrong. Everton fans were saying that it wasn't that player a couple of years ago. What is what I'm saying, and now he's improved, which is something that is not, it's not surprising. I say James Garner, so he signed a new 4.5 year contract with Everton in January 2026. Okay, well that's game over then, isn't it? Because Everton will put they put a crazy price on any player that we're linked to, so that's not going to happen, is it? Question maybe for if Mr. B's in the chat, it would be interesting to find out if Jensen signed a new deal, because then we could see if there's a situation with that one. At the moment, at the moment, poll shifted, so people favouring Tonali. Make sure you get involved in that vote. I will have to wrap up the stream quite soon, but make sure you get involved in that vote so we can get a good snapshot. but Garner ended up at Villa. But if he's under contract at Everton for another 4.5 years, then that's not going to happen, is it? So if you're a Garner, you wouldn't want to come back. Then how do you rate the treat? What's your thoughts then, Jim? Because I'm just trying to think how much Garner was out on loan, wasn't he? Then, but I suppose that I can't remember. I think Alvaro Fernandez, but he was at the club for years and didn't get any games. I can't remember the situation exactly with Garner, whether he was loaned out. Did he come back to the club at all? I'm not sure. I'd say definitely Tonali. Cake said Tonali is your first choice. Is he your first choice over any midfielder? Like, are you saying that Tonali is your first choice if Man United are talking about Wharton and Anderson? And if so, that's absolutely fine because he's a lot of people rate him pretty highly as well. And I think when we were talking about him first linked to Man United, then he was definitely up there. I think Newcastle fans kind of think he's going to leave as well. And they just, I think Newcastle fans just look at Tonali as a bundle of cash that they're going to be spending on someone else now. I think they've mentally kind of moved on. But no, it's interesting to see that you view him that highly. So let's go. Shall we give the poll a little? Well, actually, it's getting close to 70% now. So if you want to vote in the poll, do it very quickly. But it looks like it's a bit game over. Sander Berge is an interesting shout. My question is going to be: how long ago did you rate Sander Berge? Because I know that there might be reasons like where you're from, but honestly, I reconnected a bit with a friend 2 days ago who's based in California, and about at least 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, he was talking about Sanderberg as a player he wanted to sign. This is going back like to 2021, around about then. So there's definitely people I knew that were looking at him and saying that they wanted him. And I'm not saying that's ever going to happen now, but that a lot of people, I think a lot of people have actually identified some good players, and we can't sign them all. So I don't think Garner would want to come back. I don't think so either. I don't think so. It's a bit like when we had Alvaro Fernandez, and I was looking at our situation thinking we had Alvaro Fernandez and we never used him. We loaned him out, and we just had no left backs at the club. It was, I think it might. Someone said that they think it was the manager at the time that, and it could well be that issue. Welcome, Tyrone, legend. Now you're giving me a problem, Tyrone, because when I think about wrapping up a stream, someone new comes in, and I just go, right, Tyrone, let's get your views. Let's have it. Let's have the Tyrone section of the show. Saying you don't need Anderson. I think they need Anderson, and if they don't get Anderson, who would you go for? Is my question. Like, who would you go for? Then I've kind of mentally gone through it and said, right, if we don't get Anderson, I'm happy with Tonali. I know that people are looking at about the issues, but I don't. Well, I really hope the gambling issue does not become a thing. That would be a big problem. And then beyond that, I kind of actually look at Angela Stiller and think if Pavel really rates him that much, and the price doesn't end up being much more than it was going to be, I don't mind that either. Okay, would you pay 65 million for him, Tyrone, though? If Bournemouth wants 65 million, would you pay that? I mean, Bournemouth taking the lead, maybe that's an extra 1 million on the price now. It's, so it would be nice if Tonali handed in a transfer request. I think you sometimes lose on like I think contracts are designed, aren't they, so that if you hand in a transfer request, don't you lose the money? Like it's not something that players genuinely. I don't think Tonali needs to force his way out of the club. Newcastle actually need to sell a player, and I think Tonali doesn't need to do anything. Like all Tonali needs to do is just play well, and you don't need any drama. Just play well, and you're going to get a good move. So I don't think he needs to hand in a transfer request. I think it's on the cards. Say 45 million max. Yeah, 45 million. I said that I would go like if we're looking at it the problem might be that if everybody puts the price, if everybody has a high price, then if he costs more than like say some other targets, if he's still cheaper than Belieber, I think is a good option. I think 45 million is just not going to be like for a selling club. If you're looking at, say, I'll say this, Tyrone, that when I was looking at what price could we pay for him, he's young, he's got Premier League experience, he's playing well. He was player of the season for Bristol City a few years ago. Or was he player in the Championship? But he was very highly rated a few years ago. He's playing well. The Premier League experience and his age kind of makes it me think that there's no way we get him for less than 50. Like, no way. I think we're going to have to structure the deal with some add-ons or something to try and do that. And so this is kind of the precedence, isn't it? If Alanga he was 55 plus 5, wasn't he, Alanga? So potentially 60. It was, yeah, pretty crazy. So Cake's saying that as an initial bid, 80 million for Tonali to test the waters, then yeah, that could be. I mean, I think people think it's going to be more money, but yeah, uh, 80. I don't know if Newcastle got so much for other players that in terms of I suppose for Isak, how much they get in the end. I don't know if they're going to accept that one, but interestingly, Cake, your view is like I know you won't be surprised by this one, but it's not shared by some people. United Side Dice says he would not touch Tonali for 70 plus million, 80 million. And so Elizabeth says, my view is Newcastle hold out. The thing is, if you want to pay 70 million, 75 million, say, for Tonali, you want to pay 45 million for Scott, you want to pay 60 for Belieber, or like 70 million for Adam like Wharton. All these clubs are going to want a bit more. So you're probably going to have to just pick one and go and say, like, this is if Manchester United wanted Semenyo, we had to offer a bigger contract, and that would have possibly made us in with a chance. But uh, the price is the price, isn't it? Like Man United weren't prepared to try and buy Declan Rice a few years ago, and we're probably going to have to pay something similar to try and get a player which we think potentially does improve our team as much as like Declan Rice improved Arsenal. So again, it's not that Declan Rice was like the best player in the world or anything. It's that, but he did massively improve Arsenal from being a team that had been struggling for a couple of years to a team that's now regularly in the title race, probably winning the Premier League title this year. It's annoying, isn't it? But unfortunately, that's the situation. So we can have Shada for any price. I don't know. I think we've got a lot of options on the table, to be fair. A lot of options. Remember when United tested the waters for Belieber and Brighton pretty much retracted that player from the table? I do, Gregory, I do. Um, but again, like you find out, don't you? Man United find out if United are actually looking at seriously trying to buy certain players. I think I think I do agree with Cake. I'm not saying that we should pay 80 or what I'm saying is you have to start somewhere and you have to see if there's a deal to be done. If Manchester United was seriously looking at Alex Scott, for example, why don't you offer 50 plus 5 or something like that? If you think they want 65, if you can get this deal done early in the transfer window, you might be able to get a better deal. And if you put an offer on the table that, say, Bournemouth were actually looking at thinking, well, what happens if they don't sell the player? Do you remember? This is the other side of the story. Do you remember when, say, Mark Gahey was going to be potentially he was linked to Newcastle, wasn't he? Newcastle were looking to try and buy him. I think Newcastle actually offered 60 plus million, didn't they? Did they offer like 60 million for some menu for Mark Gahey? And then I'm pretty sure Crystal Palace said they wanted 75. The deal didn't happen, and they got like a third of that just not much later. So you have to be careful. It's one thing setting a price, but at some point you have to be realistic and say you like if United go in quite early with one of these players like a Scott, you could maybe get a better price. But do you remember the transfer window last summer? it started being that all the prices started going up. Man United spent so long negotiating Mbeumo. I thought he was going to go up in price. It's ridiculous. So Big Sam stuck his oar in saying United should be getting Thiago. How much is he going to cost? Like, I think Thiago didn't he have like a 70 million price tag? I won't worry about this one. As a Brentford fan, don't worry about it. Like Man United are not going to spend um, Sesko money on another forward player. It's literally that's not in the budget at all. I think he's doing really well. But you know how it is, isn't it? It's that every player gets linked to Man United. Just don't worry about it, Mr. B. I think that one's safe. If you've got a midfield player that's having a great season that's aged between 21 and 24, I'd be concerned. But I think you might be okay with this regard. I don't think Man United are looking at strikers at this point in time. If we buy a forward player, we're going to go somewhere cheap, aren't we? 100%. So, so tonight's the captain. They're going to demand a premium. Yeah, Newcastle don't have the financial muscle to do as much as they want to do in the window. They need to get a big. There's no point in selling Tonali unless you get a big transfer fee because they need to do things with it, and that's why they're putting a price tag of like 75 on like 70 on Gordon. Like he would be a much worse purchase in my opinion. So yeah, exactly. I'll say this for Brentford fans like Mr. B, and you know your guy Sully, who's a Brentford fan. If you see him in the chat, please like send him a link so we can get him back in. He was a good guy as well. So 80 million for Thiago. Manchester United need to buy three midfielders. We probably need to buy a left back. We probably need to get a centre back. We are looking at a left-sided attacking player, and we are looking at trying to get maybe a striker backup. There's definitely not 70 million plus for like Thiago, however much he's going to cost. Gordon, apparently, I'm not trying to influence you, Berber, but Gordon apparently came out about a day ago, 2 days ago, and said he really wants to join Liverpool. Does that change your mind? Because when he said that, I think Liverpool fans, we know that he obviously came through Everton. I don't think I don't think fans were particularly happy with that kind of stuff coming out. So yeah, that is true. Yeah, big up Jarvis. Appreciate that, my friend. And hopefully, Jarvis, you have to maybe we'll have to collaborate sometime. Hopefully, well, if you're doing some late night stuff, I might. Yeah, if you need a guest to just moan about transfers, then or talk them up. No, but thanks for your feedback and stuff on players though, because I know that you've been doing the same sort of thing as well on Tactical Devils, like brilliant channel as well, looking at top quality news and transfer content. We're probably looking at there's literally so many transfers coming out that I think United are just looking at this point in time, just weighing up the options as well. And V's saying that mentioning Tonali's betting problem, saying untrustworthy. Okay, Jarvis. I will be doing one on my channel. Maybe we could get, if you fancy getting involved. I'll have to check what I'm doing at the moment, but unless it's because you're not available, in which case, absolutely fine. Jarvis on Scott Watch. Yeah, I think tonight is going to be a tricky one, isn't it? We're going to be against what are potentially one of the better midfields in the Premier League as well. I will say now that I will generally have to go in a few minutes now, so I think I've got a poll running. Actually, we did the other polls. I don't know, but if anyone's got a final question for people that just tuned in recently, we are we used to be Red Devil United. We've rebadged because of certain things. If you able to share the stream to reconnect, that would be massively appreciated. I've spoken to a few people that have shared it on other channel socials, but please share the stream and just let people know that if you see people on other channels that you know are part of the community, just maybe mention it. But I'm not going to be spamming too much stuff. If anyone's got final questions, this is what I wanted to look at. If you were choosing one or the other some people are going to be pretty happy regarding that one. Um, yeah, not to be honest. Short answer, they don't really know. Long answer, don't really know. Didn't get a satisfactory explanation. Have to restart here, unfortunately. But best option out of Tonali and Scott, 70% in favour of Tonali. So a big vote for Tonali there. I think maybe I don't know what's actually putting people off or making people change their mind or have an influence. If you think Scott's a better option than Tonali, I think some people look at the price, and if you think that Tonali's a better option, then yeah, then fair enough. That's I'm looking at this thinking that there's probably a bit more experience from Tonali. Then you got international experience as well, although not so much this season, I'm guessing. So I think they're both good options. Like for me, they're both good options. I would say for United, if we can get the right price, yeah, I did. We did a match prediction yesterday, and if you want to look at the match prediction, it's the one that says Euro out because he was injured, and so we did get the tactics board out, and we did go for the tactics board, and we did like kind of go for different permutations. I had one idea in my mind which I think Manchester United should go with. We as a better had a slightly different idea for the defensive setup as well. So I thought it was a very interesting conversation. I did see some recent stuff this morning saying that will Casemiro play in defence? I'll say this: he better not be. Um, so, so if Garnacho scores, I'm walking into the sea. Don't do that, Ryan. Don't do that. The funniest thing I've heard recently on the channel is Helgi told us that his hair is very important to him, and if if Manchester United get a head coach next season that is anybody but Michael Carrick because he thinks that's a done deal, he's going to shave his head. So that might be happening at some point, but that's probably going to be something potentially for the summer. But I'm not saying you should make crazy bets, and I'm saying to Ryan, definitely don't walk into the sea if Garnacho scores because you never know. Even Garnacho can fluke some sort of shot. I mean, I'd be surprised if he gets on the pitch, and if he does get on the pitch, I think Manchester United need to take one out of the Ashley Young treatment of Di Maria. They know what to do. They know what to do to Garnacho. If Garnacho's on the pitch, I think our team know what to do. You've got to buy a Rashford shirt if Sesko scores. Sesko's not going to score 10 goals in 4 games. You're safe with that one. You're very safe with that one. No, that's a safe one. I think if you're looking at any other crazy bets, Helgi would be shaving his head. Enjoy your sadness. No, Helgi would rather. No, I don't want to speak for Helgi. He'll be on himself later on to talk about this, but no, Helgi's view was he's just very sure that he's so sure that Michael Carrick's going to be remain as head coach that he will shave his head if that's not the case. So he just doesn't think there's any alternative that's going to be chosen. So he's not going to be happy or sad. Actually, he would be sad that he has to shave his head, and he would have got his prediction wrong. But I don't think he'd be disappointed if Michael Carrick stays on. I think his favourite option would be a different head coach, but I don't think it would be. I don't think it'd be. Well, we'll find out, won't we? It's one thing shaving your head. One thing that he will notice if he does do that, he will be disappointed by how slowly it grows back. So I say he did say he was considering it in the past. So maybe this is one where maybe he actually does want to do it, and it won't be a problem. He should have done. There's a lot of bets he could have done, but that's just one to look out for. So last questions, like for 1 minute, if people got any questions at all before I head off, we'll be back to live. I'm tonight, hoping for a watch along. If we can't organise that, then we'll be live for the match reaction at 10 p.m. late night streaming again on the channel. Carrick has found out about Helgi's forfeit and has decided to turn down the United job. Breaking news. Thing is, I did say that if you follow Helgi on social media, please feel free So definitely DM him any story you see regarding Nagelsmann. That would be good. That would be good. So I'm looking into it, Gregory. If I can set up a watch along, this is one of those games where I might find it actually difficult to get a reliable stream to see the game myself, and I'll be setting up for the post match. But hopefully, if I can get a guest presenter, I'll be able to come in and out of the stream, but I won't be able to run a stream. If I can get a guest presenter, then I might be doing a watch along. That's so it's not guaranteed, but I would like to try and do one if possible. I'm just going to see if I can. It's one, but based on where the game's on tonight, I can't actually do that myself, and it might be quite difficult to do some without a bit of help behind the scenes. So I'm looking into it, Gregory. But 10 p.m. will be a done deal. We'll definitely be there at that time to discuss the match. But watch along is 50-50 at the moment. But I'll try and schedule it as soon as I know either way. Otherwise, join us at 10 for the match reaction. But anyway, be up, guys. Enjoy any football matches you're watching today, and we will see you late tonight. We're hoping it's going to be like 7 or 8 p.m. when we start streaming, but it might be 10 p.m. But we will catch you in that one, guys. Again, thanks for subscribing if you're new. Thanks for sharing if you're able to do that as well. And we will catch you live later on today.